Welcome to another episode of Career Tea. I'm excited today for our guest, Steph, who is a lead designer at Nova, and she's held multiple other positions at different companies as designer and lead UI UX designer. She also teaches at a college on the side, so we'll be learning about the challenges she's faced along the way, as well as the advice she has for students, but also professionals who are interested in this career field. Steph, welcome to Career Tea.
Thank you. Hello.
I appreciate you spending the first Sunday football here on Career Tea with us.
Of course.
I don't know if you watch football or you have a team that you support.
Not really.
Yeah,
the
no.
New York Giants, but we won't
New
go
York
there.
Yeah, I don't know. We're Bills fans.
They're not too hot. So.
All right, so to kind of get started, I know that you work currently at Nova, and you're a lead designer.
Yeah.
Before I get into what a lead designer does, I want to learn a little bit about the company, Nova, that you're working at. What do they do? What's their expertise? And what's the day-to-day like at Nova?
Yeah, Nova is a very early startup. Basically, it's an app that's connecting creatives with freelance type gigs.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing really well in the film content community right now. So think photographers and videographers. It can be very much like a gig-based lifestyle. And so the app is essentially a marketplace for jobs. And if you need, say, a photographer or a makeup artist or a videographer, you can post on the app.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much centered around like last minute gigs. So, hey, I need someone this weekend, or I need someone for a couple days, but like it's in a week. So it's a quick turnaround, quick gigs. Yeah, it's.
Is it something like, have you heard of Fiverr?
I have heard of Fiverr.
Is it similar to Fiverr? Because I know, I guess Fiverr is more online type of jobs.
Yeah.
But would you say Nova is similar to that, but more in person?
Similar, more in person, a lot more like localized to like just New York. Whereas Fiverr, you could hire you probably still could hire someone, maybe in the future, really far away. But I think it's really isolating in the sort of film content space for now. Yeah. I think it has big dreams to grow, but yeah.
Nice. How new are they? You say they're a startup.
Nova started, I believe, in March. I actually joined a couple months ago. I joined in July. So I've only been there for a couple of months, but it started out as an Instagram page. It was two guys in the film community who had friends with gigs and were posting like, hey, I have a friend who needs someone for this video shoot. Is there anybody available? And so it really took off as just a private Instagram page. And then they had the idea of turning it into an app, turning it into a marketplace. And it seems to be going really well. We're currently fundraising, but
wow,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You're pretty much like, you're part of like the beginning growth of a startup.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool to be part of.
It is cool. Yeah.
So being like a lead designer, lead UI UX, I personally don't know. What is the difference between UI and UX?
Yeah.
What does it stand for, and what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, the difference. Okay, so UI UX stands for user interface, user experience. There are sort of two types of design that happen very much in tandem. So user interface is what an interface looks like. It's the buttons, all the elements and components that make up a screen. And then user experience is how someone feels when they're using an app or a website. You want your user experience to be really seamless, easy, no frustration whatsoever. And they're fundamentally intertwined. Like what something looks like helps a user use it, and how something feels when someone's using it is very much dependent on like what the UI looks like and what a UI is signaling to a user to click or interact with. So that's probably the best definition I can give of what UI UX is, but it's very synonymous with product design as well. Those terms in my mind are used interchangeably as well.
And when you say product design, you mean digital products, correct?
Yep.
So if someone says that they're in graphic design, how does graphic design differ from UX UI design, or are they kind of in the same field?
Yeah, I definitely classify them as being different. Graphic design is usually a little bit more about, not always, but a little bit more like static poster design or certain types of print design. That's not always true. You can definitely have a graphic designer for web or like web assets. But a lot of times that kind of gets into brand designer.
Yeah.
I will say this industry is riddled with terms that have a lot of crossover and fuzzy definitions. So like this is something that I'm sure somebody else might have a different idea of as well. But in my mind, graphic design is about communication. It's about a little bit more about visuals, and it just like feels more static. Whereas UI UX design is very interactive, and things change when you do something and things respond.
Got it.
In that, yeah.
If somebody wants to, I guess, go towards graphic design, would they still be studying UI UX in school?
No, I think there's actually a lot more programs out there for graphic design specifically, or communication design. I think UI UX is like, it's definitely different, but a lot of students do go to school for graphic design, and there's a UI UX class or a web design class, and so they will get a little bit of exposure. For example, I teach for a graphic design MFA right now, and I'm teaching an Intro to User Experience and Interface 1 course. So they're very similar, but they are still different. Yeah.
So speaking of, what students would study, what did you major in college, and what school did you go to?
Yeah, I studied something called New Media Design at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. And it was a very multidisciplinary design program, but it largely focused on, like a lot of our courses were on UI UX design, thinking about websites, apps, and products in that way. But it was really like there was classes on like motion design, 3D design, animation. Like it was kind of covered a big range and allowed us to take it where we wanted to. I have folks that I graduated with who are motion designers now and 3D designers and animators and doing things that aren't what I'm doing, which is like pretty focused UI UX product design.
So it's kind of like you cover a lot of the digital product part of it in undergrad, and then you kind of niche out when you go to full time. So you said that, so I guess, kind of thinking back to like graphic design, is that where like, I guess people who come up with logo designs, that's kind of what their title would be, like a graphic designer?
Yeah, either graphic designer or brand designer. Again, the terms in the industry I think are so fuzzy, but yeah, I think if you're doing logos and things like that, you probably went to school for graphic design, but then you spun off into maybe a brand designer. But I think it depends.
Would you ever be interested in that?
Yeah. I've done logos before. I've done a little bit of like brand and marketing design. So I definitely think I have graphic design chops. I think graphic design is a lot more about like typography and layout and sometimes messaging and communication. So I think that like heavily is intertwined with interfaces and what they have to do too.
So you're, I guess, going through college and doing internships. What type of internships do somebody in new media design, what type of internships do they get? And what do those internships like day to day kind of entail? Yeah,
I mean, it's a good question. I think there's a lot of range. I had an internship at Fossil. It was the watch company, the bags. Some people have heard of it, some people haven't. But my internship specifically was like very UX heavy, and it was very focused on, I think I was iterating on a navigation for like a site navigation for 3 months, like the whole time, just a nav. It was 2 navs, they were stacked, but minor details. So that was like very honestly dry and boring for my tastes. But some folks will have internships. I mean, there's so many different types of companies out there. Mine just so happened to be focused on e-commerce and sort of the challenges and goals of e-commerce. But some of the other students fellow students in college, like, went to Amazon and were doing UX internships there and working on all sorts of things that like had probably nothing to do with navigations. I think it depends very much on like what team you're at and what product you might be working on specifically. So I think there's a lot of range. It's almost hard to answer.
So I guess let's say somebody didn't study new media design undergrad, but they graduate and they have a creative side to them, right? And they kind of start to realize that. And let's say they're in like, I don't know, business, science, something non-related to creative, major or field, and they wanted to kind of go into new media design or UI UX design. How can they make that transition? Because they're not really in school to take classes. What resources is there for them to kind of tap into that?
Yeah, it's a good question. For someone who wants to get into this field, I would say the best thing to do is to actually just start with an idea and make something, and start to like wrestle with what it means to make an app for an idea that you have. A lot of folks will there's a huge boot camp community. Like, it's something that a lot of people do. They take a boot camp class or two to get introduced to user experience design, UI design, which is amazing. And I think it democratizes design education. I think at the same time, it's really hard to get a job from just a boot camp or just a class. I think ultimately mastering product design comes with repetition, and like repetition across a range of design challenges and a range of screens and apps and goals and industries. So I think it's a hard field. You have to have a lot of like self-initiative and motivation. Yeah. But it can definitely be done without a degree, and people do it all the time.
Yeah. So from what I hear, it's kind of like tapping into, I guess, the boot camps and the communities was probably the best way to I guess, network and make those connections.
Yeah. And mentorship. I'll piggyback off of that. Having a mentor and someone to really give you advice and steer you in like highly contextual situations, you're going to learn a lot faster than if you're kind of just like doing what you think is right, but not having like the actual, like having someone with real advice, real world experience to give you advice. Yeah.
So I want to kind of take a look at full-time careers and opportunities in UI UX design. When you graduated school, what was your first job out of college? Because I know you've held multiple different positions at multiple different companies. Yeah. So I want to know, what was your first job? And then what was your role and position? And kind of what is, now we know you're a lead designer at Nova. So I want to know kind of the transition and the progression from your first full-time that you had until now at Nova.
Yeah. Okay, a lot of questions. Let's see. First job out of college was at an agency called Instrument, based in Portland, Oregon. And man, I credit that agency for like so much of what I know today. I think I went to a really good college program, but like I learned so much at that agency. I was there for 3 years. And I was doing a range of projects, but for like big companies with big problems. One of the first big project I worked on was the Marriott mobile app. And we redesigned it from the ground up. Like, we started from scratch. The client had a bunch of initiatives that they wanted to solve with that redesign. So it was really cool seeing like the 0 to 1 process, and also working with really smart, talented people. I think I was a junior at the time. So seeing how strategy can just like lay the foundation for like UX strategy, laying the foundation for an app, and making sure that all of the things that users need to do are clear and accounted for. So working with really talented designers and creative directors that like helped steer. I had a lot of ideas as a junior, but I didn't have that sort of like focus. So working with folks who could help instill that in me. Other projects there were, what did I do at Instrument? Worked on an Epic Games series of projects for Epic Games.
That's huge.
Huge.
Epic
huge.
Games is,
It's
a giant.
Yep. And I also did some work for Salesforce. So just like big companies with big problems. And working with just like such talented people.
Marriott, Epic Games, and Salesforce. Those are great clients to work with.
Yeah, huge.
On your like first, full-time job.
Yeah, a couple other big ones too, but they were like shorter projects. So
anyone that's, playing games through Epic Games or using the Marriott app, you've essentially built the backbones of it years ago.
Absolutely.
So that was your first job there. And I know that you've been a lead designer, senior product designer. Kind of quickly give me like the difference between a product designer versus how different is that from UX designer and product designer? What's the difference there?
Hold on, lead designer and UI UX designer, or
like product designer versus like, I guess, lead designer.
Yeah, they're kind of the same. Okay. It's more about like the level. Yeah.
Got it.
I think lead designer, at least in the context of what I have it as now, is like a little bit more of an umbrella term, because it's a startup. I do so many different things, from brand design, logo design, UI UX design. Basically, like, I feel like I'm wearing a lot more hats than I did when I had just like the senior product design title. So think of it more, at least in my context, as like an umbrella term. But again, the industry has such crazy naming, and people call different things different names.
So I guess you're a lead designer now. What's the progression after that? Like, what are the levels? It could
I'm at
vary, I guess.
it could vary a lot.
differently.
I'm also at a startup, and like startups can do whatever they want,
Yeah,
and they
yeah,
can
yeah.
name people however they want. I want to
Which is
say though,
exciting.
it is exciting, yeah. When I was at least in the agency space, the sort of trajectory was junior designer, mid-level designer, senior designer, and then there was sort of two tracks. There was creative director and I think it was art director, and so you could be an associate, either one of these, associate art director,
Mhm.
or an AAD, or you could be an ACD. So the sort of art director,
Yeah.
creative director track. So it goes associate, I think no prefix, and then maybe executive was the top one, the highest title. Executive creative director. That sounds right, but I could be wrong. But so lots of levels, and that was just for the agency I was at. I know some places have like designer 1, designer 2, designer 3, designer 4, and they have their own matrices of skills and tasks that you need to be mastering. But yeah, tons of range. It's hard to say. It's not consistent.
Yeah. You mentioned that you are also, you're doing teaching
Yeah.
on the side.
Yeah.
I feel like if anybody does teaching, especially like at a college, like you have to really love what you do.
Yeah.
I don't think
100%.
anyone's gonna be like, oh, I don't really like what I do, but I'm gonna go teach a class.
Correct.
So I want to know how, how you got the job of being able to teach
Yeah.
at a college, because I always had the assumption that you kind of need like, I guess, a PhD or
Yeah.
So how does that work? How did you apply to teach at a college, and how do you like it so far?
Yeah. I have this like saying and thought called network before you need it. And I didn't even know that I was doing this at the time, but back in 2019, when I was working at Instrument in Portland, there was a really close relationship between Instrument and Portland State University. And Portland State would, invite Instrument to talk in their classes and attend senior portfolio showcases. And I was pretty recent out of college when I started at Instrument, so I was feeling very like connected to like the student work and really wanted to get involved with Portland State.
Mm-hmm.
And so attended a couple of these like events, met a couple of like the professors and program chair folks. And one day I just asked one of them, I was like, how does someone who wants to get into teaching, like, what can I be doing now to get ready for that? What can I do to set myself up? And the gal I talked to, lovely, by the way, gave me good advice. And it's funny because she gave me advice, like, she basically told me to like put on a weekend workshop, like basically like teaching, but in a vacuum, in a 2-day workshop. It didn't really come to fruition, but February of 2020, I got an email in my inbox that says, hey, we had our professor, our design educator fall through for this position. Would you be interested in teaching it? And so it's so interesting because had the right conversations, expressing interest is like one of the first things, like it's such an easy thing to do. And so I put myself out there a month or two. It may have even been more than a month or two prior, but put myself out there. And then when something happened, I was top of mind, which was very much luck based.
Yeah.
But so I co-taught. I had a buddy at Instrument of mine. He and I both were interested in teaching, so we decided to do it together, which, being pretty like junior at that time, was great and made a lot of sense for us to like tag team it. Yeah. And so then from there, one class leads to another, if it goes well, which it did, and then it leads to another and it leads to another. And it's really hard to get that first experience, which I feel like happens in jobs too. It's sometimes like hard to get your first job, but once you get it and you have that, like, you have it on your resume, you've got it in your back pocket, it can be a lot easier. And so that led to another job, which led to where I'm at. I'm at Maryland Institute College of Art, which is an amazing art institution. And it's crazy. Like, I can't believe I teach, but I love it.
That is so cool. And I mean, just hearing that you're saying, you teach at a college makes me nervous. I'm not even the teacher. But how many classes do you teach right now?
Yeah, I only teach one. I teach one night class. It's user experience and interface 1. Very much intro to the space. Yeah. So I have like 13 or 14 students right now, and it's a lot.
So teaching at a college, what's your least favorite thing about it?
Oh my gosh, my least favorite thing is grading. And you know why? It's because design is so subjective and context-based. Every single student is trying to solve like a very different problem. Like every single project might be the same like type of project, but it's different subject matter. It's different, user needs, different problems, different, so many different things. And so much of evaluating solutions and like evaluating a student's final like work is about their process and it's about their problem solving. And so grading's really hard. It takes a lot of time, especially because I want to be thoughtful. Like you can't just give a student an A or a B. Like it's not that simple. It's all about the context and explaining the details around so many different things. So it's hard. It takes a lot of time, but that's how students like really learn through some of that feedback throughout the course of a class too, not just the final grade. But yeah.
When I was in school, there's always some classes here and there that there's a student or two that make it super hard for the professor or teacher.
Yeah.
Have you dealt with any situations where there's a student?
Yeah.
And how did that feel being kind of new to teaching?
Yeah, it's definitely hard. I think it stems from, though, like a student just like not being interested in the subject matter, needing to take the class for whatever reason, whether it's like to fulfill an elective or, like somewhere in their course, like maybe the class they wanted to take fell through. So I feel like and this is very, very rare, but the student or two that isn't doing the work or isn't passionate or is half-assing it really stems from just like a lack of passion. Like they're just not interested in this thing and they have to go through it, but it's hard. So it's not fun, but I feel like I know the reasons why. And it's just, if your head's not in it, it's not in it. And it's challenging to finish out the work in the projects.
Yeah, makes sense. And I agree. I think if somebody's not really interested, they'll be doing anything else but to pay attention.
Yeah, of course.
One more question about, being a teacher at a college. So one, I'm assuming that you're going to want to continue doing this on the side.
Yeah.
Because you seem to love it.
Yeah.
And two, at what point, I guess, or was I just wrong about thinking that, you needed to get like a PhD to become a professor?
Yeah.
Because you're teaching at a college now.
Yeah.
So what's the difference there? Is that just a misconception?
No, it's not a misconception. Every school and every program, I think, has their own rules. I think I'm an adjunct.
Okay.
I don't even know like what my actual title is, but if you are full-time or tenure track, most schools and most programs do want you to have either a master's or a doctorate. But because I'm an adjunct that
like part-time on the side.
Yes, it's because I don't need to meet those requirements. But if I were to take teaching more seriously and want to maybe be full-time one day or tenure track, what have you, there's a lot more. And even tenure track, you have to fulfill a lot of requirements and a lot of like papers and publications and things like that. So every school has their own sort of program. I don't think it's a misconception. I think you are supposed to have like a master's or a doctorate of some sort. But yeah, I think it depends. But yeah, I will see if I ever teach full time. I think I love being able to teach and reference my like career experience. I think if I were to go teaching full time, I think I would really miss being able to make those links between like what I'm teaching and like what's actually relevant in the industry and what's relevant to like problems that I've solved in the past. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think you'd be a great professor to have. Because, like, when I was in school, I always thought about this is, like you're bringing real life, real world, projects that you're working on at your company and you're teaching it. And I feel like your students are going to be able to, like, make those connections and, like, understand the concepts more. Yeah. Versus if, like, there's a professor that, it's been many years they've been in the field or maybe they never were actually in the field. Yes. I feel like it's a little harder for students to make that connection or become interested in the topic.
Absolutely.
But like they'll see you teach it, they'll see that you're in the field, the clients you're working with, the work you're doing, and they'll become more interested automatically because they can kind of relate them together. Yeah,
100%. I try to open up my files as much as I can and be like, look, this isn't a project requirement because I feel like it. This is a project requirement because this is something that I do constantly. And man, I do think it connects. I think it clicks in students' minds being able to see those connections and they take what I'm saying that much more seriously, like when you have that credibility. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that professors could do more often is finding how like what they're teaching actually relates to like real world. Yeah. Because sometimes when we learn some things, like I could not think like how I would use it in the real world, and I'd be like, I don't want to learn this. So it's not that important.
Yep.
So seeing that you're at a startup right now, I kind of want to get an idea of what your day-to-day is like for people wondering if they should join a startup or if they should join like a bigger company. What's your day-to-day like at Nova?
Yeah.
And how does it differ from your day-to-day at your previous company?
Yeah. My day-to-day at Nova, I think right now, because we're so small, my day-to-day is very open. I don't have a lot of meetings, which is amazing. I have a lot of heads down time. It's very free-flowing, where it's up to you to ping someone to be like, hey, I need to show you this, or let's review this, like, I don't know, let's review some work that's in the dev environment. So right now it's very open. Once a week we have like a design review, and they're hefty. We cover a lot of stuff. Maybe we should break them into more than one design review. But yeah, we have one all hands per week. My schedule is very open right now, which is very much in contrast. I was at a Series B startup before this one, kind of in the real estate space, and I had a lot of meetings. There was, oh my gosh, stand-ups every single day. There was like lots of design review. Well, actually, there wasn't that many design reviews, but I just had so many meetings. I'm even blanking. I like put it out of my mind how many meetings I had. But it's very job to job, and it very much depends.
You've been in quite a few startups. So I feel like you kind of like the environment of a startup.
Yes.
And I feel like it's exciting too. I haven't been part of a startup really, but I feel like it's exciting because it's new, it's growing. You don't really know where the company's going.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, but I think it's not
for the weak.
No, I don't think it is. It's very multidisciplinary. It's very, you as a single person can impact a lot of the trajectory of what's happening, and your ideas can actually make a lot of impact. And you're working with people like a lot of times, like every startup I've been at, I've like had pretty close, depending on the age of the startup, but like you're working with the CEO closely, or like you're very much impacting big parts of the business. Like design sometimes is like seen as this like artsy field, but no, it's business strategy. Like design is business strategy and how it manifests. So that's been really cool. But yeah, startups are very chaotic, and there's going to be a lot of last minute changes. And sometimes you're going off of just guesses, like gut instincts. It depends on how much vision or conviction a leader has as to like where they steer things. But yeah, it can be challenging. It's very much like I would say a multidisciplinary space. Yeah. Usually good for generalists, not sometimes specialists, don't get me wrong, but very multidisciplinary. Yeah.
Cool. So I have kind of moving forward now, I have a list of questions that I want to ask you. Some of them are more personal, some of them are more related to industry. Okay. So we'll just go through them and don't spend too much time thinking about them, a few seconds, and you can tell me what you think.
Okay.
So the first one is, what's one piece of advice that you would give your younger self years ago, right, that could potentially change your career path? Yeah. Or not necessarily change your career path, but what's one advice you would give your younger self?
Okay. Two pieces of advice, actually. The first is to not worry about like the categories of education, like math, English, science, etc. You do not need to fall into one of those buckets. I think grade school and like, high school, you're very much forced into those class subject matters. And I kind of hate that, because that's not representative of all of the opportunities that happen afterwards. And the second would be this is actually, my mom told me this growing up, and I've had managers who've also echoed this, but just like be a sponge. You have no idea what exists out there if you don't try it. So being really like open-minded, especially early on in your career, like you just don't know. There's so many things. Try it out, see how it makes you feel. Not being into something is actually a win for you, and it's going to steer you in a better direction.
Yeah, I agree. Like I like the one you said about being a sponge. Yeah. I think it's good to take in all the information that you get. You don't have to use all the information, but just taking it in, because there's little pieces in there that you might be able to use to kind of help you in your career. Yeah. What's an unexpected lesson that you've learned either in your career or just in life that's kind of helped you shape your career path being a lead designer now?
Oh, unexpected lesson. Oh my gosh.
Could have been part of a project. Yeah. Something that went wrong.
Yeah, I think Something that's kind of unexpected. I think like in my first agency job, I was working with so many talented people, and I was actually like really hard on myself. I was like, why am I not as good of a visual designer as like this guy over here? Like, why can't, I had this teammate who like could keep really complex UX user flows and like dependencies in her mind, and I couldn't, and I kind of felt like bad about myself. Like, why aren't you as good at this other person or this other teammate? And then I think at some point it was like, no, your experience is valid and you're rounding out their skill sets. Like, there are things that I am good at, and that's okay. So surrounding yourself with people who are better than you in some facets is actually like a huge strength. You're going to learn a lot from them, but also you're rounding them out in ways that maybe you don't realize. So not to be too worried when you're working with absolute badasses. It's okay if your dial is a little bit different in where your strengths are.
Great answer. So being in design, UX, UI,
Yeah.
very creative field.
Yeah.
What happens when you hit a roadblock, right? You're trying to think of a design and you just hit a block, you can't think it. Where do you draw inspiration from for your creativity?
Yeah, I mean, product design is problem solving. So I think there's a couple different ways to unstick myself. Sometimes it's going back to the problem. It's like, are we solving the right thing? Like, maybe we need to look at this from like a slightly different angle. I think interfaces are everywhere. So there's usually like no shortage of inspiration and ideas as far as, I mean, like our phones have thousands of apps that you can go look at. So a lot of referencing happens. Like something about UI UX is like, you're not reinventing the wheel. Like, you're really not supposed to like change what a button does or looks like, like there's a lot of established Lego pieces. It's just about how you put them together. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of references online. There's like more visual oriented references, like, hey, how do I make this look really cool or like clickable or appealing, whatever it might be. And then there's also pattern references, like how screens are connected together. Something that I always reference and tell my students to use is Mobbin. It is a repository of...
How do you spell that?
Mobbin. Okay. It's a repository of thousands of apps, and it's just like screenshots, flows, patterns. So instead of like downloading an app on your phone or even knowing what app to download, you can filter products by, checkout flow or like whatever it might be. So that's probably like the biggest asset, like real, like a tangible asset in my day-to-day life that like helps me find inspiration and get like unstuck sometimes.
That's great. So just kind of like using your resources that's around you, and there's plenty. Yeah. Next one, circling back to you being a teacher. As I mentioned, nobody becomes a teacher unless they love what they do.
Yeah.
Do you remember, was there a certain thing, or do you remember a moment where in your career where you were just like, it clicked for you, you're like, I love what I do, and this is the path, I know I'm on the right path?
Oh my gosh, when it clicked for me that I love what I do was when I actually went to college. Like, I went to RIT as a business major. I think it was like digital marketing. I'm pretty sure the major was digital marketing, something like that. It may have had like a slightly different name. Because I like the idea of helping businesses like do things in like a digital space. However, business I found personally to be very dry, very like guess and check, very like, we're going to try this thing, we have no idea what's going to happen. And I had these two teammates in college who were design majors. They were in the program that I was in, and we all played soccer together, and I saw the homework and the projects that they were doing, and I was like excited by it. I was like, I want to be doing that. Like, that looks interesting, that looks fun. So I changed my major and just like got really lucky finding a career path that also like scratches an itch that I have and like makes sense with who I am as a person and what I like to do. So it clicked for me like even before I changed my major. Like I knew like that like what my friends were doing was exactly what I wanted to be doing. So yeah, the rest is history from then on.
That's cool. It's kind of like you were keeping like an open mind.
Yeah.
And kind of just exploring a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I hope there's people out there kind of like clicks for them like that too, because I know a lot of people are going to have a harder time kind of finding what they like to do.
Yeah, it's hard.
But I think with just like experiencing and trying new things, talking to people.
Yeah.
Hopefully maybe Career Tea helps them find what they like to do or inspiration from it. The next set of questions that I want to ask is more kind of industry wide, not necessarily personal. So there might be, your answers are going to differ. It's really what you think.
Okay.
But what would you say is a misconception about the UI UX industry that you want to either, debunk or that you hear often?
Yeah. Something I hear, well, when I tell people what I do, like, sometimes with people who don't know the space, I just say I'm a web designer. I say that I'm an app designer because I don't want to throw out these acronyms that some people have no idea what they mean, which I get. And a lot of times, the first thing they say, they're like, oh, do you code? And I'm like, no, I don't code. And they're like, design? You have a whole, some people are shocked that the sort of design task is its own role and its own thing. A lot of people immediately assume that oh, if you make websites, you're a developer.
Yeah.
It's no, design. There's this whole world of design that strategically is really great when it comes in tandem with development. When you're actually focusing on what things look like, how they work, being really, really user friendly. So that's something that I get a lot that I want to debunk. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Next question is kind of similar to my last one.
Okay.
So maybe your answer would be the same, but I want to ask it anyways. What's one thing that people, because like I said, US UI design, I'm just learning everything about it now.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I was one of the people that thought maybe there is some coding in your work too, but now I know that there isn't.
Yeah.
What's one thing that people rarely see behind the scenes of what you do that you wish it was more recognized or talked about?
Yeah. I mean, design sounds like art. People think that oh, you're a designer, you must be really artsy and you just make things look pretty. Oh my gosh, no, it couldn't be more different. Design is creative and strategic problem solving. Design is sort of bridging three different things, which is technical limitations, it's business goals, business initiatives, capitalism, and it's thinking about the best user experience. Design is not just visual. It is so much more than that. It is really complex thinking and creative problem solving.
That's great. Every question I'm asking, I'm learning so much more about it. And I'm maybe I should go through this now. Is there an emerging trend, I guess, when you look at the industry overall, the field you're in, is there any trend in UI, UX that you think is kind of going to take over or maybe revolutionize the industry? Yeah,
this is a really interesting question. I think there's a lot of hype around AI right now, which I think I'm going to be curious to see how that pans out. Right now, I don't think it's where it needs to be, but I'm not an expert, so I'm not sure. But I'll be really curious to see how AI impacts tech and UI UX design specifically too.
Yeah.
The act of me creating apps and websites, it'll be interesting to see how AI helps generate interfaces or generate ideas. I'm not convinced, at least yet, that AI can handle the sort of complex problem solving and all the different things that intertwine in sort of what I do. You're usually balancing politics and current structures, and you're balancing context that users might have. And I'm not confident that AI is going to be able to, at least not yet, we'll see, be able to it'll help generate ideas, but I don't think it's going to replace a UI UX designer, for example.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, not yet. We'll see.
Is there any AI programs that you guys do utilize? Or
I've tried a couple, but not really. No. Midjourney is great, and some of the image generation ones are good for creating assets, creating images or creating not even icons, but a lot of asset creation. That's kind of where that comes into play. But there's a tool that Figma, the main design tool, has an AI thing in it. I've played with it a little bit, but not a ton. It helps a lot with actually organizing brainstorms, not design, but more brainstorming and ideation. So yeah, we'll see what AI does. I think something else that I'm really interested in seeing where this industry goes that I want to touch on is anti-design. And what I mean by that, I don't think that's a actual term, but Instagram, for example, we have these apps that are very addictive, and I don't think doom scrolling is healthy for anyone. I think this is a huge problem. And I'll be really curious to see how and if apps can monetize and flip. Instead of sucking users' attention and keeping eyes on platform, can someone figure out a way to like create an amazing company that like focuses on human connection and like actually meeting up in person? Because I really think that like people are feeling isolated, and I think that there's like I think it's like, I bet you it's our device's fault. Like we're all kind of locked in on our phones, and I'm definitely a little bit worried about that. So this sort of like anti-design, anti-dark patterns, how can we actually like be a little bit more ethical with our product design?
No, I think you're right on with that. I mean, especially like if you look at like when I look at when I was younger, where technology wasn't as big, we spent a lot of time, hanging out with friends, doing stuff outdoors, versus like now the younger generations, they're doing a lot more being on their phones inside, playing games, video games.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a lot more. So you can tell how technology is kind of taking over that.
Yeah.
And I hope that you just gave a lot of good ideas to people out there. I mean, that's a great idea of thinking of some sort of app or idea to kind of help people like socialize more and be less on their phone. So I'm hoping someone's out there right now just starting to code it and figure it out.
Yeah, right. One more idea I also have, and that I've been noodling on, not an ownable idea by me by any means, but like right now we have like, I don't know, you might have like 50 apps on your phone, maybe even 100, but like sort of like, is there one interface sort of to like rule them all? Like, Siri's kind of starting to do this. Smart TVs kind of have this where you can control and you can go into a bunch of different apps. But I'm curious to see maybe how that like manifests on our devices, because I think they're still pretty like siloed and isolated. But like, yeah, I'm curious to see the lines between our apps getting blurred a little bit, and how you can control functions within apps, and even like moving away from interfaces, maybe even into like voice, which again is Siri, and that's like speaking into our devices. But like, what does a voice interface look like? How do you communicate to someone what they can do with their voice? Like, I think it'll be really curious to see if the industry sort of moves in that way.
That would be cool. Yeah. And I'm a victim of doom scrolling myself, so hopefully that something gets figured out there.
Yeah.
Who's been your favorite client or project that you've ever worked on, and why?
Oh my gosh. Favorite client or project I've ever worked on? I'm probably going to have to say the Marriott app. I learned so much. I worked with such a badass team. It really was. And it might even be why I like startups so much, because we had the sort of like, we had the ability to start from almost scratch, not quite scratch. But being able to like really look at a holistic like environment and problem and series of needs, and be able to build an app from the ground up, like catering to each of those, was so badass. I think the design too that came out of that, and like the system was like very clean and very simple, but amazing. It's a really interesting challenge to solve. Like, you have the Marriott app, right? And the Marriott Bonvoy is like it's not that new anymore, but the Marriott Bonvoy sort of like loyalty program exists. But within the Marriott, are you? Yeah, there you go. Under the Marriott umbrella, there's like 30 plus hotel brands, and I'm probably gonna even mix up the brands right now, but like your Ritz-Carlton feels very different than your like budget, I don't know, the budget hotel that you stay at in the middle of nowhere. But those might all be under the Marriott umbrella. And so designing an app that was able to hold like 30 different brands, it was a crazy challenge. It's amazing like how we solved it. The team like that I worked on was pretty amazing. I think it just like set my career. Like, I had such a positive early experience that I think set me up for what I aspire to be able to do and the work I aspire to be able to create. That project was sick. Yeah.
Very, very lucky to have, a big name client like that. I feel like it's always inspiring, motivational.
Yeah.
Any type of experience you get is good, but when you have a big name like that, it is motivational, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Next couple questions are a little bit more personal again. So in everybody's careers and journeys, there's somebody that kind of motivated them. Maybe they would classify them as role models, but someone who maybe just pushed them in the right direction.
Yeah.
Who would you say your role model is, I guess, or someone who pushed you in the design world?
Oh my gosh. There's so many. I don't know if I could name them. I feel like my professors at RIT stand out as being amazing. Like, I don't know, whatever they did at that program, like, I think they really figured a lot of things out, and I'm so grateful for my education. I had some professors who were like just like really smart and could answer questions really quickly, but gave me a lot of like real world context, which again, we kind of talked about that is helpful. I had professors who like pushed me and were like, there's literally no excuses. You're supposed to be working like 8 hours a day. I don't care that you're doing other things. Like design is supreme and you need to be good at this field. So professors that like really instilled in me to work super, super hard and get those reps in. And then, I mean, even at Instrument, a couple creative directors, managers, fellow designers, just like, oh my gosh, I've learned something from I think everyone I've worked with. Yeah, I can't pick just one.
I think that's a good mindset. Take away at least one thing from everyone.
Yeah,
even a bad experience, take something away from it.
I love that.
What's a habit or two that you do daily to kind of boost your creativity? I know we kind of talked about like kind of getting roadblocks, but I'm wondering if you have like a daily habit or two that you try to focus on.
Oh, a daily habit. I will say I'm my most productive and creative when I sleep well, eat well, and exercise. I hope that's not a surprise, but like if I can get a good workout in and get like a good meal in for breakfast, you know, like some of the staple things that they kind of say, it's actually true and it actually matters.
I feel like a lot of people know that.
Yeah.
But not everybody's probably going to do those things.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not perfect. It's not an everyday thing, but I know it's a tool in my toolkit that if I need to, you know, have a good day, those are things that I need to do.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Those
are great.
Yeah.
I think those are those three, you know.
I think we should leave it.
Yeah, I try to eat well, exercise, and I try to get enough sleep. Some mornings I wake up on like 5 hours of sleep. I'm like, why am I so tired?
It's terrible. Yeah.
Sleep. What would you say is the majority of failures that people face in UI UX design come from?
Majority of failures. I think sometimes we can solve the wrong problem. I think, product design's weird because there's a bajillion different elements at play. And sometimes, if you're trying to solve the wrong problem, like you're going to feel like something's off and something's a little bit weird, or like, if the strategy's a little bit wrong, it can feel a little bit weird. So I feel like, but that happens a lot. Like that's pretty common. Something I think is interesting is like team structure and like team chemistry. I think when someone has hired or put a team together, like being intentional about like personalities and skill sets, not a design thing, but like a people thing. I think the work tends to turn out better. It's a lot more enjoyable being on those teams. So sometimes projects and things fail, definitely if the team is like a little bit wrong. But I think it comes down to like strategy and direction. Like I've been in places in teams that like think they know what users want and like think they know that like this is the correct, you know, feature or thing to implement. But you know, maybe they weren't that close to the user to begin with, and then we end up making something that nobody cares about, or like there wasn't an opportunity for in the first place, and that can be like really defeating. So really understanding your user, making sure that like somebody has a vision, but that it's like grounded in something. It's grounded in a strategy. So yeah,
makes sense. Yeah. This next question might have you thinking just slightly. So if you could design any app that could solve any world problem.
Oh, sure.
All right. We could kind of be lenient on that. If you could design any app or an app that could solve any world problem, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to start with like a lot of my frustrations.
Okay.
I feel like healthcare in general and insurance is horrible to use. Like as someone who's like looking to see like, oh, what provider is covered by my insurance and can I see a specialist and when is their availability? And there is healthcare, I think, and insurance is an absolute shit show. And I really think that something needs to be done somewhere to help like the user experience of getting and receiving and finding healthcare is really hard and it's really bad. So I think that's a world, and I don't think that's specific to the US. I think that that's something that can be looked at across probably the globe, depending on the industry. I think a lot of times interacting with government services, depending on what it is, can also be really horrible and challenging. I think there's a ton of room for improvement in the government space. I'm trying to think what else. Things like, I mean, I definitely had another one that I'm trying to think
Well,
of.
I mean, those two are great
Yeah.
areas, and if
Yeah.
there's anyone out there that's kind of like looking to do a personal project,
Yeah.
I mean, you just gave them great areas to focus on, because I do
Totally.
agree that there is lots of room for improvement there.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you think of the third one, let me know. But
Okay.
we'll go to the next question.
Sounds good. Yeah.
And the next one is about career switch. If you weren't in design
Yeah.
and you were to go into a completely different career field,
Yeah.
what would that field be? I know you love design.
I know.
But
I do love design, and it would probably be something design adjacent.
what if it was completely different?
Oh my
career?
gosh, no, you can't do that to me. I mean, I was gonna say like something like furniture design, interior design, like even like culinary, like cooking, going into like the culinary space. Like I just like making things from scratch, or even, you know, using existing pieces. So I think that would be probably a good adjacent career track. But if I really had to like flip my life on its head, something in the travel space, something like in the hospitality space. Like I'm definitely an extrovert. I'm definitely a people person. So I think, I don't know what exactly it would be, but something in that realm sounds pretty rad. Yeah.
Cool. I think seeing how creative you are, and like, I don't think you have a non-creative side. I think you have just all creative side. So it makes sense that you would go into, you know, cooking or somewhere where, you know, where you're people, you're creating something new. We're on to our last question, and I think one of the most important questions. I want to ask you what advice you would have from everything that we talked about. What's a couple things that you would gather as advice to give to students or young professionals who are interested in UI UX design and want to go towards the field that you're at?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, great question. Oh man. I think the first would be just to be like ultra curious, and it goes back to full circle, like be an absolute sponge, like absorb everything, try a lot of different things. Because you don't know where it's going to lead. You don't know what you're going to learn. I think I would say, network before you need it. I can't even stress how important this is. It's especially when you're a student, especially if you're someone who's like new to a field and curious and wants to learn more about something. It like can only help you to reach out to people and to try to ask them a ton of different questions. My advice is going to be very different than like another designer who maybe even I work with or I'm really close with. Like there's going to be a lot of variety and you can learn a ton. So yeah, be a sponge, network before you need it. Ask questions, just be curious. You know, there's no wrong questions. Who knows, you might even ask, you're going to express interest by asking questions, and you might learn something. You might spur something that person hasn't even thought of. So, I feel like I probably have more, but that's a good batch.
That's amazing. No, that's amazing. I absolutely agree with those advice. I think those advice are great that students can use, but also young professionals as well.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming on Career Tea today.
Yeah.
I hope the list of questions were kind of fun.
It was great.
Made you think about a couple of them a little bit. It's a new format I'm trying. Kind of want to come up with some fun questions. So I hope you enjoyed them, and I hope our viewers took something away from it as well.
Yeah.
You gave a lot of good advice, and your career path is definitely interesting. Maybe someone out there is going to go do a personal project in healthcare, government. Or who knows, maybe someone's going to go be a part-time teacher at a college now. So I'll share your LinkedIn link under the video. So if anybody wants to connect, reach out, ask questions. I hope that's okay.
Sounds great.
So thank you so much.
Yeah.
And guys, if you have any type of questions that you want to hear from our guests, overall general or different industries that you want to see, guests to be interviewed, please comment down below. Let me know. You can comment on Instagram, send me a message as well, and we'll make sure to have those covered.
Thanks for having me.